The most marvelous aspect of the problem raised by the recognition of Neanderthal man as a distinct type is his apparently sudden disappearance. He is replaced, with the dawn of the Aurignacian period, by men of the same type as now occupy Europe. What happened at the end of the Mousterian period we can only guess, but those who observe the fate of the aboriginal races of America and of Australia will have no difficulty in accounting for the disappearance of Homo neanderthalensis. A more virile form extinguished him. He suddenly appears in Europe, from whence future investigations may disclose. The one thing we are now certain of is that he was not suddenly converted into the modern type of man, wrote Sir Arthur Keith, in his classic 1915 book, The Antiquity of Man. The story of human evolution has often been told through the bones of adults, strong, robust skeletons bearing the marks of a hard life. But hidden in the soil of ancient caves and rock shelters lies a softer, more intimate story. The story of Neanderthal infants. In recent years, groundbreaking archaeological discoveries from France and the Middle East have revealed that Neanderthals did not merely live and die as crude brutes. They mourned, they buried their newborns, and astonishingly, they laid their infants and even newborns to rest with care, sometimes in fetal position, the same posture seen in many adult Neanderthal burials. This deeply human behavior, centered around the most fragile and innocent members of their society, speaks volumes. It forces us to reconsider what we know, or thought we knew, about these ancient relatives of ours. Were Neanderthals truly so different from Homo sapiens, or were they perhaps closer to us than we've dared to admit? In 1914, amid the turmoil of the First World War, a remarkable discovery was made in the Dordogne region of southwestern France. At the site of Le Moustier, the skeleton of a 4-month-old Neanderthal infant was uncovered. But soon after its excavation, the bones vanished into obscurity, presumed lost or misplaced during wartime chaos. However, it was not until 1996 that anthropologist Bruno Moray stumbled upon them again in the French National Museum of Prehistory. Miraculously, many of the bones were still embedded in a sediment mix unique to the Le Moustier site, confirming their identity. Now known as Le Moustier II, this infant is one of the most complete Neanderthal baby skeletons ever found. Though just 4 months old, Le Moustier II already displayed several adult-like Neanderthal traits, including robust bones and distinct skeletal proportions. But what is truly extraordinary is how this baby was buried. Le Moustier II appears to have been deliberately placed in a grave, in a fetal position, just like adults at other Neanderthal burial sites. Tools and animal bones found nearby further reinforce the intentional nature of this act. Although the discovery of the La Chapelle-aux-Saints Neanderthal skeleton in the same region as Le Moustier in 1908 was one of the earliest and clearest candidates for deliberate burial, Marcellin Boule, the pioneering French paleontologist, best known for his monograph on the La Chapelle-aux-Saints Neanderthal skeleton, was deeply skeptical that the burial was intentional. He argued that the positioning of the bones could have been the result of natural processes, such as the collapse of a cave or the accumulation of debris. This skepticism extended to other individuals found at the same site, including 2 Neanderthal children and 1 infant. These remains were less complete, and Boule doubted their anthropological significance, partly because he did not believe they had been buried with deliberate human intention. Later excavations and reanalyses of La Chapelle-aux-Saints have reversed Boule's position. Modern archaeologists have confirmed that the site did include deliberate burials, including of children and possibly infants. Stratigraphy, bone positioning, and taphonomic evidence now overwhelmingly support the original interpretation. Sir Arthur Keith, the British anatomist and paleoanthropologist, had a more open-minded but cautious stance than Marcellin Boule regarding Neanderthal burials, including those at La Chapelle-aux-Saints. Keith was inclined to accept the view that the adult Neanderthal found at La Chapelle-aux-Saints had been intentionally buried. He accepted the interpretation of burial more readily than Boule did. He saw the burial as an indication of a rudimentary spiritual or symbolic consciousness in Neanderthals. We see in the Neanderthal man of La Chapelle the first glimpse of man's concern for his dead. If these children were buried with the same care as the adult, then we must assume that the instinct to protect and honour the dead was not confined to the aged or strong, but extended to the young and helpless, Keith wrote. Keith also acknowledged the presence of child and infant skeletal remains at the site, and while he did not write as extensively on them as the adult male, he did not dismiss their potential significance. Arthur Keith's interpretation helped pave the way for modern acceptance of Neanderthal burials as intentional and meaningful, including those of infants. He noted that the burial of such young individuals, if deliberate, strengthened the case for Neanderthals having symbolic or cultural behaviours. However, he was cautious, emphasising that more evidence was needed, and that the preservation and placement of the infant remains made interpretation difficult. Unlike Boole, who portrayed Neanderthals as brutish and cognitively inferior, Keith believed that Neanderthals were very human-like, though he still considered them a side branch of evolution rather than direct ancestors of modern humans. He resisted the extreme dehumanization of Neanderthals and argued that their physical robustness did not preclude emotional or symbolic life. Another powerful case comes from La Ferracie, also in southwestern France, where 8 Neanderthal individuals, men, women, children and infants, including possibly even newborn babies, have been uncovered over the years. One of the most telling finds was a 2-year-old child buried some 41,000 years ago, known as La Ferracie 8. In a recent reanalysis, researchers used modern technology to confirm that this child was intentionally buried in a pit dug into the cave sediment. There were no signs of scavenger damage or weathering, and the body's placement defied gravity. The head rested higher than the rest of the body, though the ground sloped the opposite way. The orientation of the body, with the head facing east, and its preservation strongly suggested ritual care. The fetal position, again, is notable. While modern humans often associate this posture with symbolism, returning to the womb or peaceful sleep, it appears that Neanderthals may have held similar beliefs, or at least practiced similarly tender burial customs. Far from the cold caves of France, Amud Cave in the Middle East offers further evidence of Neanderthal compassion and ritual. Nestled along the north wall of the cave, archaeologists discovered the articulated skeleton of a 10-month-old Neanderthal baby, laid on its side in a niche, protected and hidden, as if tucked into bed. The grave is estimated to be between 50,000 and 60,000 years old, and while the skull had suffered damage over time, the rest of the skeleton was well preserved. A particularly intriguing detail is the jawbone of a red deer lying directly on the baby. This is unlikely to be coincidence. Instead, researchers interpret it as a ritual offering, perhaps a token of protection or a symbolic connection between life and death. Nearby, bones from another infant were found, suggesting that this niche might have been a space reserved for child burials. The Amud infant displayed clear Neanderthal characteristics: no chin, strong muscular attachment points on the jaw, and a round foramen magnum, the hole in the skull base through which the spinal cord passes. That such features were present in so young a child supports the idea that Neanderthal morphology developed early and were distinct from Homo sapiens. To the northeast, in Syria's Dederiye cave, researchers uncovered yet another haunting image of Neanderthal burial. A baby, perhaps only a few months old, was found laid on its back, with arms extended and legs flexed. A sub-rectangular limestone slab was placed near the head, while a triangular flint piece rested above the heart. These items were deliberately inserted into a burial fill of sterile soil, distinct from the surrounding cave deposits. The care and symbolic positioning of these objects are striking. This was not simply a body tossed into a hole. It was a funerary act, rich with meaning. The child's body was extraordinarily well preserved, and its features closely matched those of European Neanderthal infants, further supporting the theory of a shared pan-Neanderthal tradition of caring for and burying the dead, particularly the young. One of the most intriguing patterns that emerges from these sites, Le Moustier, La Ferracie, Amud, and Dederiye, is the consistent use of the fetal position for Neanderthal burials, regardless of age. This is the same posture that modern humans used for burial throughout the Paleolithic and Neolithic periods. While the reasons remain speculative, it suggests a symbolic worldview, one that may have connected death with sleep, rebirth, or return to the womb. To find newborns and young infants placed in this position implies that Neanderthals understood even the briefest lives as meaningful. It hints at continuity in belief systems passed down generationally, and perhaps a shared mythology or narrative about what happens after death. Although the burial customs point toward shared humanity, the skeletal differences between Neanderthal infants and modern human babies are crucial in understanding our evolutionary divergence. Neanderthal infants, like adults, had larger faces, broad nasal cavities, and long, low brain cases. The absence of a chin is a hallmark Neanderthal trait, present even in infants like those from Ahmud and Lemoustier. Muscle attachments on the lower jaw were more robust, indicating powerful jaw movements even from an early age. The foramen magnum, the opening for the spinal cord, was often round in Neanderthals versus the more oval shape in Homo sapiens. Despite these differences, both species shared key developmental milestones. Infants were dependent on caregivers, required warmth and food, and died from many of the same vulnerabilities. The presence of grave goods and carefully prepared burials reveals a deeper truth. These babies mattered. These burial sites raise profound questions. What does it mean when a people bury their infants with care and possibly ceremony? What kind of emotional, cultural, or symbolic framework does that require? Until recently, it was fashionable in some scientific circles to downplay Neanderthal intelligence and social behavior. But these infant burials offer powerful counterpoints. They imply memory, grief, expectation, and even hope. The use of objects, such as deer bones or slabs, suggests ritual thought. The fetal positioning hints at metaphor. And the very act of digging a grave and placing a fragile body inside, protected from the elements and predators, demonstrates empathy. Archaeologists note that traditions likely played a role in these acts, repeated gestures passed down through time. These were not isolated events, but cultural patterns. Indeed, these discoveries paint a picture of a world where stories and symbolic ideas guided action. The care Neanderthals took to bury their dead, especially their youngest, draws us into their emotional world. These acts were not about survival. They weren't strictly utilitarian. They were about memory, mourning, and meaning. The evidence from France and the Middle East tells a unified story of intentional burial across vast distances. Whether in the ice-bound caves of Dordogne or the humid warmth of the Levant, Neanderthal parents buried their babies much the same way, with tenderness and intention. These discoveries challenge the old caricature of Neanderthals as brutish, instinct-driven subhumans. They reveal a people who loved, lost, and remembered, and who, in their grief, turned to ritual. In burying their babies as they did their adults, they confirmed a belief that every life, no matter how short, was part of a larger story. And that story, for all its differences from our own, feels remarkably human. Thanks for watching and commenting.